He comes the broken heart to bind, the bleeding soul to cure. I want to launch us into Advent with a guiding metaphor. This from Isabel Wilkerson. The inspector trained his infrared lens onto a misshapen bow in the ceiling, an invisible beam of light searching the layers of lath to test what the eye could not see. The house had been built generations ago, and I had noticed the slightest welt in a corner of plaster in a spare bedroom and had chalked it up to idiosyncrasy. Over time, the welt in the ceiling became a wave that widened and bulged despite the new roof. It had been building beyond perception for years. An old house is its own kind of devotional, a dowager aunt with a story to be coaxed out of her, a mystery, a series of interlocking puzzles awaiting solution. Why is this soffit tucked into the southeast corner of an eave? What is behind this discolored patch of brick? With an old house, the work is never done, and you don't expect it to be. America is an old house. We can never declare the work over. Wind, flood, drought, and human upheavals batter a structure that is already fighting whatever flaws were left unattended in its original foundation. When you live in an old house, you may not want to go into the basement after a storm to see what the rains have wrought. Choose not to look, however, at your own peril. The owner of an old house knows that whatever you are ignoring will not go away. Ignorance is no protection from the consequences of inaction. Whatever you're wishing away will gnaw at you until you gather the courage to face what you would rather not see. We, in the developed world, are like homeowners who've inherited a house on a piece of land that is beautiful on the outside, but whose soil is unstable loam and rock, heaving and contracting over generations. Cracks patched, but the deeper ruptures waved away for decades, centuries even. Many people might rightly say, I had nothing to do with how this all started. I have nothing to do with the sins of the past. My ancestors never attacked indigenous people, never owned slaves, and yes, not one of us was here when this house was built. Our immediate ancestors may have had nothing to do with it, but here we are, the current occupants of a property with stress cracks and bowed walls and fissures built into the foundation. We are the heirs to whatever is right or wrong with it. We did not erect the uneven pillars or joists, but they are ours to deal with now. And any further deterioration is, in fact, on our hands. Unaddressed, the ruptures and diagonal cracks will not fix themselves. The toxins will not go away, but rather will spread, leach, and mutate as they already have. When people live in an old house, they come to adjust to the idiosyncrasies and outright dangers skulking in the old structure. They put buckets under a wet ceiling, prop up groaning floors, learn to step over the rotting wood tread in the staircase. The awkward becomes acceptable, and the unacceptable becomes merely inconvenient. Live with it long enough, and the unthinkable becomes normal. Exposed over the generations, we learn to believe that the incomprehensible is simply the way that life is supposed to be. James Baldwin once said that not everything that is faced can be changed, but that nothing can be changed unless and until it is faced. We're beginning this year, the new liturgical year today, year C of a 3-year cycle, A, B, and C for the liturgical wonks out there. A is year of Matthew. Matthew's a teacher. He's making the case that Jesus is the new Moses. Everything is about fulfillment in Jesus. How do we understand Jesus to be the bearer of a new law? Sort of an insider club there. There's certain things you might make sense of and many things that you won't make sense of if you don't have the schema for it. But that's what Matthew's up to. And Matthew gets year A. Year B is Mark. Mark is about brevity and urgency. It's about the clarity of Jesus' message that the kingdom of God is near. Drop everything and follow. Luke is a bit of an artist. Luke's going to go after that deep stuff. Luke isn't going to come at you at the head. In a way, Luke isn't really coming at the gut. Luke is coming for your hearts. The beauty of the gospel text itself is inspiring. It inspires art and music. It inspires poetry. There's stuff in Luke that does not show up elsewhere for good reason. It's because Luke's got an agenda, as do the rest of them. And this entire liturgical year, until we get to next Advent one, we're going to be listening to Luke and Luke's agenda for each and every one of us. And Luke is coming for your heart. The deep stuff. The stuff that you probably hide from others, and pretty good chance, if you have a pulse, also hide from yourself. Right? That's where Luke is coming. And I just want you to know that up front. Because as a gospel preacher myself, I'm obliged to follow the text where it leads us. And we're going to have a whole year of things that may be hard to hear, stuff that gets at those hidden spots. We may have the instinct to get up and run away, and that's okay. It's okay if you've got the instinct. Just hold it, feel it, sit with it, and just know that Luke knows that this is what Luke's doing. There's a tradition of understanding Luke as a physician, right? Luke the physician. And so it's important that we understand that while Luke is coming for our hearts and that Luke is going to tell us really hard things about ourselves, about maybe why things aren't working or why we feel so crummy, Luke does so as a physician with a heart to heal us, right? With the desire to tell us things that we don't want to hear but that maybe we need to hear. Because without hearing the clear diagnosis about what's wrong with us, we will not get a clear prescription for the cure, right? And so there's incisiveness, and that's one of the gifts that Luke brings us. And I just want to forewarn you, that's part of the year, right? That we're going to have a doctor telling us things about ourselves. Right? Not only what's happening with our bodies, what's happening with our minds, but more importantly, what is happening with our souls as creatures doing our absolute best to be human in the world that so often dehumanizes us. What does it mean to carry that soul in this world? And Luke's a pretty gifted doctor. I'm going to forewarn you, probably all of you will join me in this. You will want a second opinion, right? That's why we are where we are 2,000 years later. We are all so often seeking second opinions. A word that's maybe more palatable to us. I don't like that diagnosis. I prefer this diagnosis. I don't like that prescription. I'm going to try this one instead. And Church invites us to consider the possibility that we only have one doctor for our soul, right? One Lord, one King, one doctor. And that doctor is trustworthy, that doctor is wise, and that doctor loves us too much to leave us the way that we are. And that doctor believes in us and knows that when that doctor tells us a hard word about ourselves and about the work in front of us, that doctor knows that we can do it. Probably thinks we can do it more than we think we can do it ourselves. And that doctor, the doctor of our souls, promises to be with us along the way. Not to tell us what we want to hear, but what we need to hear. Not to make the path easier, but in the prophetic language, maybe to make it a little straighter, the straight line. We will not choose it. Those of us who've been children or raised children know it is never the easy road that we choose. Many of us have to learn the hard way. And that's okay. God is infinitely patient, infinitely loving. God will circle back around again next week and next year and every year thereafter until we are well, until we're whole. And not just us, but us, all of us. Advent always starts off with the notion of cosmic disruption. It's foreboding. Many folks have been out, perhaps had a great time at Thanksgiving. Maybe you had some fun and some ho 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 or Friday at some point. You've probably heard some Christmas music already. No judgment. You may already be to Christmas, but we've got Advent to deal with. And so we often show up to this first Sunday of Advent and we hear about things ending and falling apart. And that can feel dissonant. Might even be a disappointment. We don't have any decorations on the trees yet. When's Christmas going to hurry up and get here? Why so vacant? Why is it so austere? I mean, the confession to begin this liturgy when it should be joy and skipping and dancing is a real downer. Why do we do it? God tries to make absolutely clear as we begin each new liturgical year that everything is up for negotiation, everything is up for renewal. Anything we have within us, among us, or around us is, despite its appearance, impermanent. Even the sun, even the moon, even the stars, even the sea in the land is going to be unbound. It's going to fall. We're going to start over, and Genesis will be told once again, within us, among us, and around us. There's no hiding anything. There is no preserving anything. It is all up for the doctor's inspection. This doctor who knows us, who loves us, who desires the best for us, who is willing to risk being rejected by us for saying a hard word to us. This doctor wants the full architectural inspection. Open it up. Bust the walls open. Anything you're afraid of looking at, open it up. Anything you've been avoiding, open it up. Anything that feels stuck or disjointed or misshapen, anything you are afraid to look at, open it up. And the entire narrative of this whole liturgical year is of a doctor who wants you to be well and can help you be well as soon as you know what's going on inside you, among us, and around us. Advent is coming this year, now nearly 2 years into massive social disruption of multiple sorts. It's completely possible that many of us, though we showed up wounded to the start of those 2 years, hiding things at the start of those 2 years, now have a whole nother layer of 24 plus months of new trauma significant trauma. It's possible that some of us who are fighting for justice have come to discover a heart that is in some unflattering and unpredictable ways growing smaller, maybe harder even. Perhaps some of us who've been fighting against everything that's happening around us are likewise finding our hearts somehow smaller, harder. Maybe we are, perhaps in Luther's phrase, turning away from God and turning away from each other. The nature of sin, which is that we turn in onto ourselves. A concave soul that doesn't have the capacity for any receptivity, not only to what God's doing, but what we're each doing. We've lost receptivity to care and concern and compassion. We've come to see ourselves perhaps as competitors rather than companions on the way. And the church tells us not only that that is sin, but that that is disease. And wherever we stand on whatever issue the world is facing, if our hearts are hardening and shrinking, then we are not well. We are not well. Advent is a time set aside each year, like Lent, a season we call a season of penitence. But this is a season slightly different than Lent, of hopeful expectation as penitent people. The hopeful expectation that if we open everything up and give free access to the doctor to diagnose and prescribe, that doctor will make us well. That is our hope and expectation, that there is a cure for us. If only we're honest with ourselves and each other about what isn't working. Advent is that season set aside to look within and ask, how is my soul? How has it been wounded? How has it been hardened? How has it turned in on itself? How has it grown calloused? How has it had its hopes dashed? How has it had its fears realized? Our hope is that God will make the kingdom come. Advent reminds us the scope and the scale of our work, which is much more modest, but no less heroic. Our work is to tend our hearts, to make us receptive and ready to receive the guidance that God will give us when God shows up and finds in us a mansion prepared for him. That's our work. Much more modest, no less courageous. Heart work, soul tending. This funny little piece from Thessalonians this morning, we usually gloss over Thessalonians. It's the earliest text of the New Testament. You should know that. I'll be writing about this some other time because there's some stuff they didn't know that they thought they knew, so they set up a whole worldview because they hadn't read the Gospels yet. Right? These are nearly 20 years before Mark is out. The Thessalonians, however, despite all that they got wrong, IMHO, despite all that they got wrong, this morning's text says that they got something fundamentally right, which is that in the midst of all the turmoil and confusion, in the midst of all the fear and uncertainty about their own future and about Jesus' second coming, the thing they were praised for most wasn't their vast confessional or doctrine, wasn't their liturgical propriety, wasn't their education, wasn't their income. They were praised for their unbounded love. Unbounded love. In the in-between times, between the first advent of Christ and the second, what they were praised for was unbounded love. For each other, and please don't miss this, and for all. For all. Our task as folks trying to be alive while walking in the shadow of death is to maintain our capacity for that unbounded love. So that when Christ comes again into our lives at Christmas, that Christ recognizes in us a mansion ready to receive him. That is our work. That is our task. That is the entire scope and scale of our witness as Christian people. That in the midst of inhumanity, we can be wholly human. In the midst of brokenness, we can be bound up. In the midst of bleeding, we can be cured. And Jesus, the great physician, will make it so, if only we'll open the doors for the inspection. Not everything that is faced can be changed, but nothing can be changed until it's faced. Prayers for a blessed Advent. Amen.